Welcome to Tony at 12. I'm Tony LeBlanc, and today I'm in conversation with James Lancaster, Managing Director of Alderney Electricity, and we're going to discuss the current, I always say this, no pun intended, energy situation on Alderney. James will also give us his views on the Alderney Energy Plan. As ever, good to see you.
Hello, Tony. Here we are again for our regular update.
I know, absolutely,
just trying to keep everybody informed about what's going on, particularly with the world situation and the volatility we know around energy systems and energy prices. So it's a good thing.
Okay,
let's see you again.
Good to see you too, James, as ever. Let's start off with the current electricity unit price. You didn't have to, whilst you got a permission from the states to up the target figure, you didn't actually have to implement it.
We did on the A tariff. That was the only one. That was the pay as you go tariff, which tends to apply to empty properties or second homes. But most people on the ordinary C tariff, their prices would have stayed under the original 50 pence price cap that we had, and we've had in place since So all in all, good.
So that's good news. And you're quite good at sort of organising the boat to come in with the diesel and the Kero at the right time.
Just everybody who's listening to this, please keep everything crossed. Don't uncross anything, because we have been lucky and we do still need to be lucky with these things. So diesel and Kero prices have dropped since the heady days of last year. With the last boat, both of those fell by about 10 pence a litre. So that's brought the fuel prices down to an underlying price of about £1 a litre. The impact on that is that it drops the fuel price component of the electricity by about 2.5p, so a quarter of that. So we're now down with the fuel price component back approaching 20 pence, which is getting back towards the long run average that we've seen over the last decade or so. So things are starting to normalise. Over the last month, we have seen fuel prices increase a little. So the last petrol shipment was up 3.5 pence. I was expecting it, because I mean, we don't see it over here necessarily, but seeing it in the UK, forecourt prices have risen by about that much, a few pence over the last month. So I was expecting to see that. But at the moment, we don't think that's anything other than the normal perturbations that you get in global fuel prices. They do vary over time. In terms of the fuel price, well, the last shipment, the July shipment, will last us now until October. Right. And when we get that shipment in, it'll last us until January. So at the moment, I'm confident that there isn't going to be a huge price shift, either up or down, actually, between now and October. And so we can look at the current conditions lasting us through most of the winter.
So just for clarification, the oil price is based on what you pay when the boat arrives. Is that right?
Correct. So, well, no, it's based on the price that we pay per litre is the price that we are given on the day the boat loads at the refinery.
Yeah.
But it all amounts to the same thing, give or take a couple or 3 days. So if we get a boat in, let's say on the 20th of July, we will have paid the 17th of July price at the refinery.
Yeah. Okay. Got you on that one.
Alrighty.
How about winter? I mean, you see oil prices stabilising, hopefully, or continuing to stabilise?
I mean, everything you say at the moment is conditional upon what's happening in Ukraine and Eastern Europe, but there is nothing that we are anticipating is going to shift massively between between now and the October shipment. If things start to push up into winter, it's because demand in Europe starts to get strained, and therefore the demand, particularly for diesel, the price of diesel may push up. Kerosene, not so much. So if we do see a shift in price in that direction, it's not going to be until January anyway, back end of January. So And hopefully that will mean that we will have got through most of the winter without any significant price impact.
Because another point in the equation is, of course, OPEC.
Yeah.
And, they were trying to cut down supply recently, presumably to fund their overpaid footballers.
Yeah, probably something along those lines. Yeah, it's a complicated equation, and OPEC, over the last couple of years, really have periodically made announcements about either increasing supply or reducing supply that has left people scratching their head. But it's true. I mean, what you've got is a group of countries there, not allowed to call them a cartel, but are
They are
looking at forward planning and deciding how they make the most money. So it's in their interest to manipulate prices as high as they can without ending up with fast stocks that they've got to dump on the market at some point in the future. So it's, that's what we live with, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we'll continue to do so as long as there's a demand for fossil fuels, presumably. Now,
exactly so.
Last time we spoke, we were talking about standing charges, because you are sort of going through a revision of standing charges. Where are we on that?
Well, so we've been in discussion with the states, because all of this is tied up with the electricity law and regulation of the company. The AEL has put forward proposals for really unifying onto a single tariff. The principle is accepted. The discussion now is the discussion which is always going to be the difficult discussion, which is what is the fairest way of doing that to make sure that the benefits, as far as possible, are spread across the entire community.
Yeah.
And there are a number of ways that we can do it. And so we're just trying to work through that. We're running different scenarios at the moment, or trying to, looking at, well, if we do it this way, what does that mean? If we do it that way, what does that mean? So that we will then collect together enough information that we can collectively decide. Or rather, I should say, the energy working group will have enough information in front of them to be able to advise the states on what they think is the best way forward when we come to make that regulatory and that legal revision.
When we've talked about it in the past, you've given the impression, I trust that I've got this correct, that essentially if the standing charge goes up, the unit price would be adjusted downwards. So correct. The total impact shouldn't be that great. Is that correct?
That's correct. So for what we're looking at, in theory, the standing charge is there to allow the company to recover our fixed costs.
Yeah.
So the things that we pay, irrespective of whether we sell a unit of electricity, the cost of actually just keeping the infrastructure going, keeping the company ticking over at the level it is. Now, the reality is the standing charge doesn't do that. It's not high enough. But where we're trying to move to a point is where actually we have better control of the management of the company and better control of the cost by recovering all of our fixed costs through the standing charge and only recovering our variable cost, which is essentially the cost of the diesel that we burn to produce each unit of electricity at the moment, through the per unit charge. So if you think about it, if at the moment somebody on the C tariff is probably paying, let's say, if you spread the standing charge across the number of units they're buying, they are perhaps paying 46 pence a unit, which will be 42 pence of the actual unit charge and 4 pence of standing charge. Now, the reality is our fixed cost and our variable cost are nearer 50-50. So what you would end up with is a situation where it's more likely the standing charge element will be 23 pence, but the cost per unit, so the marginal cost of electricity, is only going to be 23 pence.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
So, yeah.
Now, the reason that we want to do that is because we are moving away from a situation where we have a centralized system. We don't, as long as Alderney Electricity is the only producer and generator of electricity and the only distributor of electricity, it doesn't really matter how we do it. But as soon as you allow other people into the mix by generating their own power on their roofs, bring other organisations in that might build renewable plants and allow them to join the mix, then we need to make sure that the underlying cost of energy does not increase disproportionately for those people who are not able to take advantage of such measures.
Yeah.
And that's why we need to shift it this way. So if you like, the company needs to become agnostic about where the electricity is coming from. And the only way we can do that is by loading all of our fixed costs onto that standing charge.
Yeah. So the states have got to come to a decision on this, have they?
Yeah, precisely. So it's how the question is not what we're doing, it's how we apportion that fixed cost between the various properties to make sure that it is done in as fair a manner as possible. And ultimately that's a political decision.
Yeah. Knowing politicians to be a little bit slow on things like this, have you got a target date?
We'd like, so I'd like to be through this over the actual discussions and have an agreed way forward within, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Thereafter, depending upon what is required, we may have to get the law changed before we can implement that. So we may still be looking at 18 months before this can take effect. And that's simply because at this level, tariffs are already enshrined in the concession law. And what we're at the same time, we're having a look to see whether or not we can make these changes without a change to the law, or whether we actually have to amend the law. If we have to amend the law, it's going to take a lot longer.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So we'll have to wait and see on that one.
Yeah. But I think, the point is that within 6 to 8 weeks, we should be able to start to tell people what's going to happen and what the impact upon their bills is going to be.
Yeah.
But to reassure everybody, if you are, for the majority of people who are ordinarily residents on the island, who are, the families bringing up kids and all the rest of it in it's a modest and sensibly sized home, then they are going to be overall paying less than they would be at the moment. That's our expectation.
That's good. And it's all down to a GY number.
It is.
Yeah. Okay. as are most things in life.
Yeah.
Let's get on to the Alderney Energy Policy, because that is something I think Bill Abel's been heading up.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, the Energy Working Group have actually done a very good job with it, and I'm full of praise for Bill and his team, because we've been trying to get this over the line for about 8 years now, and Bill and his team managed to get it by the scruff of the neck, and as we discussed before, they did actually manage to get an energy policy approved by the states in January of this year, and that's what is now guiding all of the discussions that we have in the direction of travel.
Yeah.
So it's made a huge change.
Presumably, if people upgrade, there are no grants available or anything like that at the present time.
We're looking at it at the moment. Again, there is discussion to be had there. I am not in favour. So it depends what you're doing, and it depends on the cost. So if, for example, we start giving, just for example, there are grants available in the UK if you install a heat pump.
Yeah.
All right. But you're looking at 2 or 3 or 4 grand's worth of grants, say, but you're looking at an installation that's going to cost you 14 or 15 grand.
Yeah.
So the issue with grants that you have to look at is actually who is taking the money, because the chances are that the people that really need the grant can't afford the system in the first place, even if the system is suitable for their property. And so you end up just diverting government money into the pockets of people who could afford it anyway. So you do need to be slightly careful about that. I would prefer to see a series of soft loans that allows people to actually upgrade their property, obtain the benefits, obtain the energy price reductions, and then pay the cost of that through those reductions, so that it's actually not hitting people in their pockets. And that then makes you create a circumstance where actually the improvements are available to everybody in the community, not just to those lucky enough to have a few quid sat in their back pocket.
Would the loan, if it does take place, a soft loan, would that come from AEL or from the states?
Could do either.
Yeah.
I mean, it is still a soft loan, and and how it would. It's probably easier if it's actually managed through AEL the way we have things at the moment, because what we would say is, all right, well, fine, we are going to provide a series of soft loans for people to improve the insulation of their properties.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our view at the moment is that there are a lot of properties on Alderney that could benefit from that are not as well insulated as they could be. So perhaps £1,000 or £2,000 might make all the difference and have a significant reduction in their energy bills. What we would then do is we'd say, all right, we'll freeze your energy bills where they were, so that you're not seeing an impact. But what we'll do is we'll take the difference between where they were and where they are today to pay back your loan.
Yeah.
So you paid it off within 12 months, and then you get the benefit of the. But you haven't actually had to dip your hand in your pocket to pay for anything.
I remember when I was young, the local electricity company would give you an interest-free loan on a cooker. So, it's not new in terms of the concept or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think that was, the sense behind that was very fine, because people were saying, people were still in those days. Sorry, Tony, in those days they were still cooking on coal and log-fired ranges in their
They were
kitchen.
indeed, yeah.
And so what the electricity company were trying to do, quite sensibly, was give people, grants or loans or whatever, interest-free loans to increase their electricity consumption by sticking in an electric cooker. The gas companies were doing the same with gas cookers back in the 50s.
Yeah, yeah.
We are not today in a situation, most people now have got electric cookers, so it's not about us as a company reducing or increasing consumption per capita. Is actually about us as a company trying to help people reduce their energy consumption and adjusting things like the tariff, the way that we charge for that electricity, so that the company can continue to operate successfully even though consumption is dropping.
They say, talking about the grid now, that in the UK, they're going to have to triple the capacity of the grid to cover all the bits and pieces that are now involved, heat pumps, motor cars, etc., etc. In the USA the other day, I saw, to do this, they're going to have to put in 47,000 miles of additional cabling, which is an awesome prospect. As far as your grid is concerned, AEL's grid, you're pretty confident that it's got the capacity?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're running I suppose, yes. The short answer is yes. The reality is that Alderney consumes relatively so little energy that the main grid infrastructure, when we put it in, already had a lot of headroom.
Yeah.
So we can move. So at the moment, peak capacity on the island is about 1.1, 1.2 megawatts. During the height of the summer, when we've got most people on the island, or in the depths of winter when everybody's got their lights on and and using power. So it's 1.2 megawatts. We can move probably 5 or 6 megawatts around the island without any difficulty. So we've got capacity to quadruple, times that by 5 bags spare. The problem that we have is the last yard.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of properties in the town, for example, which are fused at 40 amps, because that's the capacity of the local LV grid, the grid immediately adjacent to the properties. And if we were to go all electric, then we would have to upgrade those grid supplies, particularly in the town area, in order to be able to allow people to increase the rating of their fuses coming into their property, and that would be an expensive proposition. I mean, if we tried to go all electric Alderney, the first fag packet calculation we come up with is it costs probably upwards of 10 million just to do some AM. Now the reality is we're not expecting to go all electric Alderney, because we are still hopeful that other technologies that will come along that will allow us to offset that requirement. So we're not looking at that level of upgrade at this time.
Yeah. Okay. We've talked in the past a lot about solar, and you've got a bit of news on that for us.
Yeah, we have been. We've been running the pre-feasibility work, pre-planning work on solar. That's now coming to fruition. So I'm certainly confident that we will be in a position to submit a planning application on solar energy this side of Christmas. What we've done essentially is we've been around the island and we've evaluated some 15, 16 different sites on the island against a whole series of criteria. For example, how easy are they to connect to the grid? What's the visual impact? Can anybody see these sites from where they live? Or, for example, from the coast path. So, and we've got, amongst that, there are a couple of sites that come out significantly higher than others, and so we're now at the point of actually going back to the technical side to say, well, how much solar do we actually need? What would it impact? What would such an array look like? And then we can submit planning application. I think the point for everybody to remember at this stage is that whilst the island plan has told us that people want cheaper, greener electricity, there is still a detailed question to ask about, well, what is the community prepared to accept in order to meet those demands?
Yeah.
And so the solar planning application is we can do it a number of different ways, but it's essentially dipping a toe in the water to say to the community, all right, you want greener power, solar is part of the mix. This is what we think we need to be doing with solar, and this is where we'd like to put it. What do you think about it?
Yeah. Okay. So it'll be a consultation process.
Yeah, of course they will. We promised right from the outside.
Yeah.
In fact, when we went back to the changes to the planning law under the 2015 review, which came through in about 2017, AEL dropped the waiver that we had under planning law at that time to make sure that anything that of any significance had to go properly through the planning process.
Mm-hmm.
And we have always said that a project of this scale we will put through a major projects process.
What sort of power do you expect to generate from these arrays?
The plan that we've adopted at the moment is what we're calling our 3x3 plan, which is deliver a third of the island's electricity supplies from renewable sources within 3 years.
Right. Okay.
So in total, that means that we need to get up to about 2.1, 2.2 gigawatt hours of power per from renewables each year. 2.2 gigawatts, that's 2.2 million units of electricity.
Yeah.
The island consumes about 6.7 million units of electricity a year, and we need to get about 2.2 of those out of renewables. Okay. So now, at the moment, we are looking at primarily at solar and wind because they allow us to deliver electricity at the lowest cost. There are other technologies, but those are at the top of our list at the moment. Solar would get us a few percent of the way to the target. To hit the target with it, we would then have to incorporate wind, which will actually deliver the majority of the output power. Yeah. If we can't do it that, we're back to looking at things like tidal again.
Yeah, and for both of these alternative energies, you're going to need batteries at the power station.
Yeah, we would put some storage onto the network. The rationale, the logic that we're following at the moment is that it is practically expensive, uneconomic, to try to store energy for long periods of time. To put that into context for people, storing enough energy to keep this island going, if we were to store enough energy to keep this island going for 1 day, the battery, if we were £1 million, we haven't got that kind of money.
Can you repeat that? Yeah, can you repeat that? We stalled at that point. The actual cost.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So if we were to try to store enough power just to run the island for 24 hours with lithium-ion batteries, we are looking at a battery costing £12 million.
Yeah. Now,
the way that we're looking at it at the moment, I'm trying to deliver the 3x3 program for somewhere between £2 and £3 million.
Yeah.
So storing power in batteries is uneconomic. It's prohibitively so. So what we're talking about is simply a battery that would allow us to create a buffer on the network. So if the wind stops blowing, or if there are gusts, or the sun goes behind a cloud, the system doesn't stall every time that we see that power drop from our renewables. That's one of the issues you have with variable renewables like wind and solar, is the wind isn't constant, the sun doesn't keep shining, and therefore you need a system behind that that will adapt for those changes. And the easiest way to do that is by having a small battery in the system. It's an uninterruptible power supply. It's like having a battery in your laptop.
Yeah. So it would essentially trigger the diesels at that point.
Yeah, it buys you enough time if you need to bring another diesel engine online if you need to, or just for I mean, the sort of battery that we are talking about is something that would be big enough to carry the main load of the whole load on the island.
Yeah.
For about an hour.
Okay.
So we're talking. So I refer to that as a square battery. So you've got a 1.5 megawatt output, and you can store about 1.5 megawatt hours. That would allow us to run the island on battery power for an hour at peak time, or for about 3 hours at the night. So it would actually allow us, under some circumstances, just to avoid switching on another diesel engine until the cloud had passed, or the wind has started blowing again.
Yeah. Talking about wind, I mean, obviously that's going to be a little bit controversial in terms of where you site the turbine. Any ideas on that at this stage?
At the moment, the two obvious locations would be either to put them out towards the southwest of the island, or up at Albert. The issue of the southwest of the island, you've got the whole airport development going on over there, and what we don't want to do is add any complexity necessarily to those discussions. So in the first instance, we're looking at Albert. But we come back to what I was saying before. The community has said it wants greener energy. We are responding by saying, okay, well, we could do it this way.
Yeah.
And actually last week I have had a proposal come forward for just outline proposal really that's talking about putting wind turbines up at Albert, where we could deliver perhaps 2 gigawatt hours, so really nearly hit our target with that installation at about 10 pence per unit. Wow. Given that diesel is currently 23 or 24, that looks like an attractive proposal, but there's a compromise there. So our community we say, all right, fine, we can deliver that, but the cost is 3 turbines, which are going to stand, you've got 40-meter tower plus 13-meter blade length, so you're looking 55 meters. The TV tower is 35 meters. So you're looking at 3 structures sat on Albert that are twice the height of the TV tower that will deliver that. Actually, community, is that a price that you're prepared to pay to get your cheaper renewable energy? And if the community says no, we'll look for another way of doing it.
Yeah, but I mean, in actual fact, I don't find them so obtrusive on the mainland. They're there, and you just accept the fact they're there.
Yeah, I mean, we've had this. I think you and I have had this conversation before. So sorry for your listeners if we reiterate it. It's largely a cultural thing, whether you view these things with joy or hatred. Some people like them, some people don't. Some people, there is a school of thought on the island that people like the island the way it is and don't like change. Particularly when we've got so much history around, then if you start putting things in at Albert, well, you've got a historic site up there. There are a whole range of different objections that may come forward, but we need to flesh out these questions. And the only way we can do that is through a consultation process. And the easiest way to do it is simply to put in outline planning, because we need to actually understand what the community wants. The community said it wants one thing. We said, okay, we could deliver it this way. Now the question is, are you serious, community? Is this a solution that you are prepared to countenance, or do we need to do something else?
I think the younger generation would be far more inclined to accept something like that on the basis that they're looking at their future. Old fuddy-duddies like me, well, I mean, it's got to happen, hasn't it? I
Yeah,
think.
I mean, where do I sit on it? I don't like roof mount solar very much. I think it looks ugly and bolting solar panels onto people's roofs. That's personally what I view. Wind turbines, I don't have a view with that. I actually think they're quite attractive structures. But then
Yeah,
my background's in the aerospace industry. I'm an aerodynamicist, so I'm,
yeah. You're
engineering, disposed of them from an engineering perspective. As a young undergraduate, I used to work on wind turbines.
Oh, really? You've
Yeah.
never told this to me before.
Yeah, I've only just remembered. No, I used to work on vertical axis wind turbines when I was at university as an
Yeah,
undergraduate.
yeah. Most
That was
interesting.
a long time ago now, Tony.
Oh no, it isn't. Let's talk
Almost back in
about.
the days almost back in the days when you were getting your cooker loans.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably after we'd finished rubbing sticks together to light the fire. Let's talk about pollution. The power station is relatively free in terms of the amount of nasties it knocks out, isn't it?
Yeah, we did. We did a baseline assessment, so and we actually do need to redo this as soon as we've got the power station operating at peak efficiency, which will be in the next few weeks. Actually, so we did a pollution survey before we started the upgrade, just to see how polluting the previous power station was. And what you do that by putting a lot of sort of static passive sensors. They're little pots that through air passes through and then the pots filter out any particulates. So we put a load of those around the island, particularly in circles in the vicinity of the power station. And actually, when it came to, we took them back in and sent them off for tests. So you give the levels of pollution, the levels of contaminants from the power station were barely registered, barely noticeable. I think I said before, the one place we did get elevated levels of emissions were just outside of Jean Stores at the time.
Yeah,
and we put that down to people stopping in their cars and rushing in for a packet of fags and back out again,
leaving the engine running. Yeah, okay. Whilst the power station itself is efficient, the kerosene boilers that virtually every house has got on the island presumably is contributing towards carbon.
Yeah, no, they are, and they are, polluting in their own way. To be honest, a modern kerosene boiler, properly adjusted and well serviced, the combustion is very, very good, and the levels of pollution, the levels of contaminants coming out, they run at about 95% efficiency. So the levels of contamination are relatively low. The biggest problem we've actually got is a lot of older boilers on the island and a lot of unserviced boilers. And so as the efficiency drops, so the emissions from those boilers tends to increase. So we could do an awful lot of good at that level just by making sure that everybody's boilers were, serviced or where possible upgraded to more modern equivalents.
The worry in the UK, James, is that they're talking about phasing out oil boilers completely by 2026. That seems daft.
I'm good luck with that.
Yeah, that's my view on it. I mean,
I cannot personally see that there is going to be a sudden what should we say, failure of supply of kerosene boilers. If they're genuine with that, probably we're going to have oversupply. So if anything, the price will start to come down.
Well, it's a load of people living out in the sticks.
With all of these things, whilst we can say, do you know what, that's actually a good thing overall, and maybe. There's always a question of timing on these things. The reality is that as a remote community, we are not yet in the position to put our kerosene boilers behind us.
No.
And so in the meantime, if we are serious about those ambitions, what we need to do is make sure that those systems are as efficient and as least polluting as they possibly can be. And that's about having modern boilers well serviced.
And that argument equally applies to people in the UK living in fairly remote places, Cornwall, Devon, various parts of the north, this sort of thing. You just can't. Some of these targets, in my view, are unattainable. So why scare the horses?
Again, I think these are headlines just to give the markets a kick. Because if you live in a remote community and people are phasing out log burners, people are phasing out oil boilers. It's going to get very, very cold in a remote cottage if you haven't
Yeah,
got logs with
of course,
oil.
of course. Yeah, and I mean that really hits the nail on the head. So you
Yeah.
know, I suppose we have to sort of look at these things with an element of skepticism.
I think that, you know, at one level, we need to take on board the message that we cannot continue to behave the way that we have been behaving for the
Yeah,
last 50, 60, 70 years.
yeah,
The politicians love their headlines, so they come up with these headline targets. No sooner do they do that, most industry insiders go, "No, these people are crazy. No way we're going to deliver that within the time frame." But I think by setting challenging targets, you do force that change.
but if you're a politician and you set a target which which you can't attain, you
Yeah,
end up getting bitten, don't you?
you do, and I think there needs. So I think my personal view is, if you're going to set a target, it needs to be challenging, but it does
Yeah,
still need to be realistic. It needs
yeah,
to be a smart target in that sense.
yeah. So there we are, James. We've just about run out of time, I'm afraid. So
Again,
that great list that I sent you, we didn't cover all the points, but I'll get you on them at some future date. Yes, okay, bin it. You actually get action on Tony at 12. Super to talk to you as ever. Many, many thanks for sparing me some time, and you know, continue with what you're doing there, because you're doing a good job.
Thanks, Tony. We'll do this again in another couple of months.
That'd be good. Thanks, James.
Cheers now.